So today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now in episode 92 of the series, and in the previous episode we saw a huge war break out between Russia and the Mesopotamian countries, and that war resulted in the victory of the Mesopotamian countries, also known as the 3-Point Star Alliance, against the Russians and their Square Alliance. If you haven't seen the last episode, then I'm sorry that you're looking at this one, but make sure to go watch that before watching this one. Anyway, if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated. Make sure to check out the 200,000 subscriber merchandise that is only available for a limited time. We only have around a month and a half left. After December 31st, the 200k designs will be going away, so if you do want to grab a piece of merchandise, I highly recommend you grab that before it's gone. Make sure to also check out the channel memberships and the Discord server, link to that in the description below. But let's go ahead and jump straight into this scenario. Alright, so like I was just saying, last time we saw the Mesopotamian countries achieve victory over Russia. They have been reduced down to a much smaller state. Now, they weren't required to give up all of the territory that they had annexed over the series of decades which they built up their empire, and that's mostly due to the fact that the AN did not want the Russian state to get another dictator and then start to expand again. They felt like if Russia already has all this land, then there won't be a desire to get even more in the future. And on top of that, they're also now a democratic country, which is going to kind of prohibit that from even happening. But yeah, they're back in the Assembly of Nations now, and they're functioning as a democracy. They're going to be working to repair relations with the countries around them because the countries around them really don't like them. But now we're going to see the creation of a new alliance just in case. First of all, Poland and the Gold Team will be reforming their previous alliance, and this is a strategic military alliance meant to deter any powers from impeding on their territory. Now, these two countries will not be the only two countries to join, as they're going to be getting another member, this time Finland. Now, Finland was in the previous alliance between Poland and Ukraine. However, they did leave because they were worried that they were going to get drawn into a war. Turns out that wasn't the best of decisions because they got invaded and made into a puppet state. But now that they're officially back, they're not going to be taking the chance again, so they rejoined this alliance. And now they're going to be getting two new members, one of which is Estonia, who has constantly been invaded by Russia, but now they want to put their foot down and continue to exist. And the other country is the Farmers Republic. Now, these guys are actually more interested in joining Mesopotamia's alliance. However, this is a regional alliance strictly for Mesopotamian countries. The Farmers Republic is not Mesopotamian, therefore they're not allowed to join it. So more likely than not, they just have a separate document with these countries that is like military agreements. But this is their actual official attack one, attack all alliance that they are in with these other countries now. And the Eastern European Military Accord is officially formed. Now though, we're coming down to Southern Africa, where we have a huge world-changing event taking place, and that is the formation of South Africa Unitaria. These three Southern African countries will all be coming together to form one united country that is under the ideology of Unitarianism, and they become the 5th Unitarian country in the world. So as we all know, the first one started over in Canada, but then we saw the one that formed in Indonesia, followed by the one in Japan. A revolution brought about the existence of Iberia Unitaria, and now we officially have an African Unitaria. These three countries all share something very similar in common, and that is that they are of purple religion, ethnicity, or just heritage, whatever you want to call it, which makes it a lot easier for them to put aside their differences and come together to form the ultimate society that is not worried about things like ethnicity or religion or anything like that. They're only worried about progressing the human race forward. The capital city of this country will not be any of the previous capital cities. Instead, it will be placed all the way over here on the coast, and that technically isn't really a neutral site because it's still within the territory of this old previous country, but at least it's a different city, so it's not like the exact same government. But yeah, these guys will make an official exit out of South Africa's economic alliance, and instead they will join the Unitarian Economic Alliance as well as the Unitarian Military Alliance. So now Unitarianism finds itself in 5 of the continents of the world out of 6: North America, Europe, Asia, Oceania, and Africa. The only continent that doesn't have Unitarianism at this point is South America, and it's pretty hard to see that coming about because these countries are very big on their own sovereignty. Remember when they wanted to all break away from Brazil, they were called the Sovereigners. So Unitarianism is unlikely to appear here because these countries want to remain separate and as their own thing. In other continents and areas of the world where there's never really been a whole lot of occupation or even military activity, Unitarianism is a lot more popular. Now, the other nations that are around this new country are kind of curious about it. South Africa is an area that hasn't experienced a lot of fighting. If anything, they've experienced a lot of unity in like economic alliances and even military alliances. On top of that, this region is pretty consistent with like the characteristics of the people here, other than over here where there's been some historical issues, but I'm more so referring to the purple areas of this continent. But yeah, like I was just saying though, they are in favor of Unitarianism. So they're just gonna kind of watch to see how this country develops and some of these other countries north of here are interested in joining. They're not going to be doing it yet. They have to hold like public referendums, seeing if the people want to do it. There's a whole process in becoming a unitarian country. There's a lot of things you have to do, but just note that the purple and the yellow countries are both interested, and even to an extent this pink one is as well. However, due to like the two main groups within this country, the brown and the purple groups, there's a tiny bit of ethnic tension, which is going to make them joining this a little bit harder. But yeah, for now, these three countries are going to watch and see what happens with this one. So far, none of the unitarian countries have collapsed. There hasn't been any issues in any of them, so it's just a matter of seeing if it's still applicable here, and if it is, more likely than not, Unitarianism will explode across the world. That is just a theory though. Anyway though, we're now coming back up to Europe, where we have a very small scale war occurring between two countries, and these two countries that are going to war are the purple Roman country as well as the orange Bulgarian country. Now in the previous episode, Orange Bulgaria was involved in the war between Mesopotamia and Russia, and they did a really good job in invading the Farmers Republic, but once reinforcements arrived from Poland, it did not go so well, and this country ended up losing land. Fun fact, Purple Rome was very close to joining the war on the side of Mesopotamia. However, they held out because they were worried that they would be overwhelmed by Greece and that Greece would end up fully annexing them. So they did stay out even though they really wanted to get involved. But the main objective of this country is to retake historical Roman lands. This is a theme that we see reoccurring in any Roman state that exists, such as this one, as well as this one. But if we take a quick look at the religion map, you'll see how the ethnicities have changed over time. Now the yellow one is actually belonging to Rome, who actually started out over here in Anatolia, but they were kicked out because they were a nomadic tribe. Still though, they did possess these lands at one point, and still though, they want them back. So Roman troops will cross the border into this previously war-tarnished country, and probably still is, and they're going to have absolutely no issue walking straight into their capital city and forcing this government into surrender. The Orange team is not a very strong country, and the fact that they had so much success in the previous war is mostly due to the fact that Greece was right below them. But yeah, we can now take a look at the peace treaty between Rome and the Orange country. Now in this treaty, the purple country is going to target this specific piece of land and a little bit more, but this is a part of that yellow heritage that they want, so you can see all the countries that are within that group. But the border will be drawn right here, and the purple team will get all of this land from the Orange country, so they do still exist. It's not full annexation, but they lose a lot of important land and become a much smaller country. Now we shift our focus down to Northern Africa, where we have to talk about the terrorist state that was established here a few years ago. Now, as we all know, this organization started down in Libya. However, they were kicked out of there and instead took hold of the Mediterranean country, and since then they've established themselves as a state. It's not a very good state. In fact, it's a horribly corrupt state where people are not valued at all, and the government is more so focused on building proxies and just retaining their political power and acting on the international stage, trying to present themselves as like an actual figure who has say in world politics. That has not gone so well with the rest of the world. First of all, they are suspended from the Assembly of Nations, so they can't even really speak on the world stage. And second of all, the world doesn't like them because they don't value their own people. Now, the terrorist state is, of course, a terrorist state, and within this terrorist state, there is a lot of terrorist activities. More specifically, the government uses their forces to target any rebellious forces that belong to the Mediterranean country, so there's still fighting happening within this territory, just on a very small city level scale. So these guys are like, blowing up buildings in civilian areas. Any attempt at international aid to the people of this country is blocked, so they're setting up checkpoints on the border and just stopping any international aid from coming in to help the people here. And now they're even adamantly like justifying that this land is their land, this land should belong to them, and that the Mediterranean country doesn't matter. Basically, we won this territory, it's ours now, you go away and you leave us alone. So West Africa and Libya are now both looking at this country and they're like, yeah, this needs to be fixed. However, they can't necessarily just go in and start invading, because that's going to make the AN mad at them for disrupting the international process. So they need another way to get themselves into this war. So the leader of West Africa and the leader of Libya will meet over in the capital of West Africa to figure out how they can go to war with this country without making the assembly mad at them. Basically, they need a false flag operation. So they decide that they're going to blow up some buildings in this portion of Libya. They're going to sacrifice a few civilians in order to justify a war against the terrorist state. So they will be blaming that attack on these guys, and the plan is set in motion. The explosion happens, people die, and there is international backlash over this. So the blame will be shifted to this country, and they're going to come out and say that they didn't do it. Now, this country doesn't have much of a reputation, so no one's going to believe them. And thus, Libya and West Africa will both declare war on this nation in the name of liberating the people here and getting revenge on those who died in this city. Once again, the terrorist country will deny the fact that they did this, but no one will listen to them, and Libyan forces will be the first to enter in, immediately taking over this major city here and sending their forces straight towards the capital. West Africa is mostly going to send their forces in from the Tunisia area, and they too will be able to take a major city within the opening days of the war. And the terrorist state is absolutely doomed here because West Africa is a top 10 power, and Libya as an entire state is of course stronger than them. Now, even though that they are winning this war, there is a lot of worry about activity that could occur after they win, because the terrorist state isn't necessarily just going to go away. The terrorist networks and the other proxies are still going to be present. So both of these countries are going to have to do a pretty good job at stopping that from happening, and they'll likely try to use international effort to aid them in that regard. But Libya will capture both of these major cities over here, liberating all of the people there, while West Africa will capture the capital city of this state. And from there, the various proxies will flee into the central area of this state, and West African military forces will attempt to follow them. However, the geography here isn't too favorable, so they probably aren't setting like their entire military out there. More likely than not, they're just like blowing them up with airstrikes. But anyway, the terrorist state will officially fall over to Libyan and West African forces, so we can take a look at what this is going to look like after the peace deal. And in this peace deal, we have the resurrection of the Mediterranean country, as well as a few land gains by both Libya and West Africa. So West Africa will create a new province up here. They will fully annex said province, as well as this major city down here. And Libya will get this entire province, which holds this major city. So the Mediterranean country is officially back. Now, they did lose a little bit of land, which is probably not to their likings. However, West Africa and Libya felt like they should have some kind of trophy from the war, a little bit of land, so to speak. And they took two major cities, so this country is going to be hurting a little bit, but they get to rejoin the Assembly of Nations, meaning that now officially every single country on this map is in the AN. No suspended members, no one that isn't involved. Everyone has a say in any international matter. Now, coming over to Mesopotamia though, we have to talk about these two countries right here. Now, know that these two countries are pretty estranged to the rest of Mesopotamia. They have a recent history of more aligning with the Horn of Africa than they do with the rest of this region, but more so, they're very interlinked with each other. They share a disdain towards the other Mesopotamian countries, they share close ties with the Gold Team, they share a language, an ethnicity, religion, all that stuff. So after years of enduring difficult times with each other, a decision will be made to finally unite both countries into one, not under Unitarianism, just under a new government. And this is a decision that is cherished by both the people here and the governments here, because once again they have this very shared history with each other, very interlinked, and they've been aligned with each other for a very long time, so it was just a matter of time until it actually happened. But their new capital city will be down here in the very southernmost city of this nation, right here at the entrance to the rest of the Red Sea. So Mesopotamia is now looking something like this. A lot of the countries have started to unite together. Now remember, the red team and the blue team, they're not allowed to unite together because that is forbidden by the peace treaty of World War IV, but that doesn't necessarily stop unification in total in this region. Now, staying in this region and talking about their economic alliance real quick, they're going to be adding a new member. Now, don't worry, it's not going to be Tanzania because that would make no sense. Instead, though, it's going to be the purple country over here. They're not allowed to join the Mesopotamian Economic Accord because they were never an old imperial country, and they also don't necessarily feel connected to like the southern African countries, so they're not going to be joining the Triangle Alliance. So instead, they'll join the Economic Alliance of the Horn of Africa, which is an interesting decision if you know the history of this region. But you know, things have changed. That was a long time ago. So the Trapezoid Economic Alliance is now 3 members strong. We now come over to North America, where we finally have a change happening. Now, this continent has been very static ever since the end of World War V. Of course, America gobbled up a bunch of countries and they spit them all out. And since then, absolutely nothing has happened here. That is until today. West Mexico and Mexico are going to war. And this is due to the fact that they still have numerous border disputes from the peace treaty of World War V over their territory. Remember, these two fought up against each other in that war. And there are various disagreements on where the border should be, as well as just the fact that the governments really don't like each other. They like to hurl insults back and forth. It's kind of like the Russia-US dynamic in real life, except just here with the two Mexican countries. They see the opposing country as the biggest threat to their nation, but those tensions will finally boil over, and the red team and the gray team will be going to war. Now, it's pretty obvious that Mexico is a lot stronger than West Mexico, and they're going to have a huge advantage because, first of all, they were just in a war against each other. So Mexico is already familiar with invading this area, but on top of that, they're also historically familiar with invading this country due to the fact that this nation used to be a terrorist state. So actually the one over in Mediterranean, that wasn't the first one. The first one was actually over here. But yeah, that was a long time ago. They've changed since then. They're now just a fully functioning democracy. That doesn't matter though, because Mexico is coming crashing in, and West Mexico is about to lose their capital city. Now, West Mexico has allies. They're not necessarily this hermit state country that just doesn't interact with anybody. They were previously affiliated with China, however, that's no longer the case because the elites in China are out of power. So they now just share a regional alliance with another country that is just north of them, and that nation is, of course, California. They fought together in World War V, and they will once again be fighting together in this war. So Californian forces will reach the front line, and when they do, they begin to push back the Mexicans. Now, this isn't like a super earth-shattering entrance into the war. This isn't going to necessarily change the outcome of the war, as it seems right now, but it will push Mexico back considerably from the capital of West Mexico, causing them to have to rethink their strategy. Down south, they will officially eliminate this holdout, and they will begin to bolster their forces in the center of this front line. But unfortunately for Mexico, there are a few other countries that are around them that aren't too favorable of them. And one of those countries is the Gold Team, who is still a little bit pissed off about what happened to them just before World War V when they were invaded by both America and Mexico. Now, they feel like their score has partly been settled with America because Texas has been released, as well as this green Louisiana country. So they don't share a border with them. There's not really like too much bad blood there. But with Mexico, they didn't really lose any land in World War V, and they feel like they need some revenge. You know, it's about time for that. So not only will California join the war on the side of West Mexico, but the Gold Team will as well. And their justified reason for joining is protection of their capital city, which apparently Mexican forces have been spotted in the area getting ready to invade. Now, that is not the actual real case, but it doesn't matter at this point because Mexico is being jumped by 3 different countries. So with even more help in this war, West Mexico will push back even further, now reaching the official border that they have established with Mexico. Don't worry, there's no border disputes in this area. They're mostly in the south, but that doesn't really matter because Mexico has been completely kicked out of the north of West Mexico. And now we see their forces cross over and begin to invade. They'll meet up with Gold Team forces in the north and establish one broadened front line. And to make things even worse for Mexico, Central America has just joined the war. At this point, it seems like Mexico is on the menu at the all-you-can-eat buffet because absolutely everyone around them is getting involved in this war. Central American troops will cross the border and instantly take a Mexican major city in the south here. There are no defending forces here because Mexico has been allocating them in the north. So Central America will have a pretty easy time invading until those forces are back down to reinforce this front line. But yeah, 2-front war now for Mexico. That's not good. Up north, the Gold Team will sweep across the border that they have with the Green Team, and they'll begin to move down the Mexican coast, which is very important for their country. They'll even be able to take this major city here. However, back over here on the front line with the West Mexican country, things aren't going so well for the multiple countries that are fighting for them. Mexico has reinforced their troop numbers in this area, and they're once again heading straight towards the capital city of West Mexico. The forces here are trying to hold back, however, it's just a little bit too overwhelming for them, so they will now solely focus on holding this front and keeping Mexico out of the capital city. In the south, Central American troops will resume their push into Mexico, now reaching over into this broadened Guatemalan area, and their main focus right now is actually just to hold this front line. They don't believe that they can get to Mexico's capital city because Mexico is a little bit too strong for them. Even with them fighting all the invading forces up here, Mexico would overwhelm the Central American country. So they just really want to hold on to what they have, and thus they will stop advancing and just hold their front line. Back up north with the Gold Team, we see Mexican forces begin to push back just a little bit. They'll liberate the coastal areas as well as that major city. But soon this front line will also stall, and the entire war slows down and comes to a halt. So no advances in the south, no advances in the north. We are in the stage of attrition. Now, it's unlikely that there's really any countries that are helping out Mexico since they were the aggressor in this war, technically. I mean, it was kind of a mutual war between them and West Mexico, but since they're stronger, they're going to be seen as the aggressor. So no help from America and no help from any other country that likes them. They're on their own, which is going to prove to be a slight issue for them because as time moves on, the front lines will begin to move again, and very, very slowly, but very, very surely, they'll begin to push back Mexican forces. They'll be removed from the north of the Gray Team, and on top of that, the Gold Team will start their advance once again all the way over here in the east. So Mexico is going to break a deal with a country that they want to get out of this conflict as soon as possible, and that country is Central America. So the leaders of these two countries will meet over here in Cuba, and they will discuss how they can get the Purple Team out of the war, and the only demands that the Purple country have are the relinquishing of these 3 provinces over here. Now, these 3 provinces are pretty important for Mexico, but there is a much bigger issue in the north. They're fighting against 3 different countries. They want to make sure that they win this war and they don't lose a ton of land. So that's a sacrifice that the leader of Mexico will make, and he agrees to give these 3 provinces over to Central America. So after the fighting is finished and the peace treaty is had, they will be allowed to take this land. For now though, they'll set down their arms and there will be no more fighting on this front. That's going to allow for Mexico to reallocate their forces up north, and they'll begin to immediately push back against the Gray Team. And yeah, this front line is very back and forth. But one front line that is no longer going to be back and forth is the one that they have with the Gold Team, because Mexican forces will successfully push back all invading forces from the north. They won't be able to take back the northeast. That's okay, because they're also able to push back these Gray Team forces and enter right back into their country. So with Central America out of the war, we see Mexico having a lot more success. Having to fight a two-front war is like never easy. But now that that's over, they can focus solely on their main target, and they reach the gates of the capital city of West Mexico. They'll push back all forces in the south here, but that is where we see the fighting end. And that's because West Mexico is going to surrender over to Mexico. They realize that they were outmatched in this war even with allies in California and the Gold Team, and they especially now realize that they're not even going to be able to push Mexico out of their own territory. So in other words, this war is a lost cause for them. So they're going to agree to negotiate peace terms with the leader of Mexico, and so all leaders will meet over in the capital of America to discuss the peace treaty, which is going to turn out to be a very interesting one. So before we get into the fun stuff up here, we'll start off with Central America. Now, once again, there was a deal negotiated between these two leaders, which would give these three provinces over to Central America in exchange for them leaving the war. So that is still fulfilled here. They hold their word, and Central America will gain all of this land. They become a little bit stronger and a little bit larger. But now moving up to the northern front line, where we have a ton of different things happening. So most notably, there are a ton of land exchanges here. But before that, Mexico will fully annex this coastal area. This is where a majority of those border disputes were, but they're no longer there anymore because Mexico has just came in and kind of annexed it all. So no longer an issue there, but now coming up here, we see that Mexico will annex all of this land from West Mexico. Also this, I don't know why it wasn't colored in. And that's all of the land that West Mexico will lose from this war. Now, over here, there's actually some interesting things happening. Now, the Gold Team did successfully hold on to this entire region up here, but they also know that Mexico could have very easily just taken it back, so they propose a deal in which they exchange land. Basically, the Gold Team wants access to the ocean, and in exchange, they're willing to give up this piece of land to Mexico. Now, I know that this is like a lot more valuable than this, but you know, the Gold Team held on to this, so I think they're allowed to have a little bit more valuable land. Anyway, Mexico gets that, and the Gold Team gets that, and these are our updated borders of North America. Now, if anyone is like interested in the provinces, there were a ton of changes, a ton of new provinces drawn up to make this possible. If I hadn't done that, you would have seen the worst border war of this series so far, so you're welcome. Anyway, that will do it for today's episode on What If Civilization Started Over. We are 92 episodes into this series. That is insane. The series is also almost 2 years old now. It will be on January 6th of 2026. And on the topic of that month, that is also the same month that this series will be ending. Right now, I'm aiming for around January 31st for the finale to be published, but things could change. You know, it's probably going to be pushed back due to the production. Other than that, I want to say that episode 95 of this series is likely going to be delayed by a week, and that's due to me being in college and having a ton of final exams and stuff. 95 will probably be a lore-filled episode, not like 90 because that was insane, but 95 is going to have some cinematic aspects to it, and I need time to be able to do that, but I don't necessarily have the time to do it with this semester in college finishing up soon. So I apologize for that, but more likely than not, WICSO episode 95 will be delayed by 1 week. Anyway, though, if you guys did enjoy this episode, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Make sure to check out channel memberships, the Discord server, and the limited edition 200k merchandise. Link to that stuff down in the description below. Let me know what you thought about this episode in the comments as well. Leave your input and leave your suggestions for the next upcoming episodes of the series as well. Once we get after episode 95, I'll probably stop taking suggestions for the series because the lore needs to come around and start to take place for the finale. So now is the time to leave your suggestions for the series and tell me what you want to see happen. Anyway, once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next episode. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Andrew Truno, Apex, Dex Lendy, Sue, Shifty Mapping, Beast the Mapper, Omega the YouTuber, Opie the Bopie, Euroball, Wizo, Rad is totally my Terminator, name. See what I do, AdizzPro, I ain't lying, CTG on YT, Garbage Trucks, Green France Mapping, Ball Mapping, Ozgeo, A Norwegian, Augusto, Pablo Sigma Cat, GNR 95, Zaylance, Lizard Tane, and Hammer Toad 45. Once again, thank you guys.